webinar series. Just wanted to start the recording. So thanks for joining today. And we're going to get started in about a minute here. I think we have a really good turnout today. We have a really great topic. And we've really been getting quite a few positive responses from the webinar series as a whole. Bill, if you can just move to the next slide. So we launched the DevTalk webinar series, I guess it was over a month ago, and our subscription list to the DevTalk webinar series has grown dramatically. We're actually over close to 700 people that are on the list. So thanks for signing up, and thanks for letting us know that these are helpful, and continue to give us feedback on the topics that you'd like to see covered, as well as how we're doing in presenting them. So you can head over to our developer events webpage on our developer community. There's the URL. And you can find past webinars that you may have missed. The recordings will usually are posted a day or two after the event. So if you missed any of the previous ones, definitely check them out. And if you have any comments on any of them, just put them in the discussion for that particular webinar. We monitor them after the webinar, and we look for any questions that come up and make sure we have answers for you. So we know if you can't stay the whole hour, that's fine. The recording will be on the site as soon as we're able to get it up there. So just a few housekeeping notes. Of course, enter your questions as they're coming up through the webinar in the question and answer section. If I can answer them directly as the meeting is going on, I will type my answer in there. Otherwise, we'll save the questions to the end. And if you have any problems at all, just reach out to me directly. Today's presenter, Bill, if you can move to the next slide, is Bill Hecox. He's on my team, and we work very closely with the EMDK for Android engineering group on a daily basis. And so you're in good hands today. And what he's done is he's actually put together a lot of the best practices for EMDK for Android. And really, we work directly with the engineering team plus large customers, small partners, pretty much everybody. So he's taken a look at all the kind of common questions that have been coming up, all the things that people have been stumbling upon, and putting those together in a nice package for you. And we'll walk through a variety of different topics, all to do with EMDK for Android. So welcome, Bill. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
All right, Rob. Good morning, everybody. So to begin with, I want to do a short agenda here to explain. We're going to cover the first three topics here are going to be more of a live demo mode where we're going to walk through some issues. These have been issues that have come up over and over again over the past year or so, that really kind of lead to a poor developer experience out of the box with EMDK, whether it be importing our sample projects or creating new projects with Android Studio, or for if you're moving from Eclipse into Android Studio and you're struggling to get your application to work correctly in Android Studio with the EMDK. I'm going to walk through some of the pitfalls and show that process and what to do to quickly resolve those issues. I'm also going to work through a sample application basically that shows you how to incorporate the EMDK into an application that would run on a Zebra device and a non-Zebra device. Basically allow you to make use, if you, for instance, you were using the barcode scanning APIs and EMDK on our device and you wanted to use someone else's barcode scanning APIs on a Samsung device, for instance. This sample app will basically encapsulate that the EMDK needs and allow you to run it on either device. And lastly, some of our EMDK concurrency guidelines. There's the EMDK when making use of particular APIs or objects, portions of hardware get locked to where they can't be used. And even though that hardware is used across multiple different APIs, and we need to make sure that we properly close out objects and so that they can be used by other APIs, depending on whether you're in which if you have multiple threads running in the background, or how you access these objects. So again, I'm going to go ahead and drop out of my presentation here and jump straight into importing some projects. So for demonstration purposes today, I'm just using our sample applications. I pulled them down from our TechDocs site. And the first sample here is our ADT sample. I'm going to go ahead and unzip that and walk through the process that most of you have probably seen trying to import an ADT Eclipse project as of now. So if we just basically open up, again, I'm running a fairly recent version of Android Studio 2.1.1. I'm going to go ahead and click import the project, find this project on my desktop. There's our ADT sample. And I'm going to walk through the wizard, let it, mostly accepting most of the defaults. Yes, go ahead. Let it pull this in. And we'll notice right away that Android Studio is griping about the selected target that we have in the ADT project. And what's unfortunate about this is that the messages are telling us, let's go to the SDK manager and select the correct one, because it doesn't seem to exist. But I have 4.0 installed, EMDK 4.0 installed, and this is available in the SDK manager. So if I went there, you really wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. To make things worse, during the import process, Cradle has not really completely finished the build process of our application node. If you look here in the Cradle scripts, normally you see our top-level Cradle file, and then we'll normally see an app module file for our application, named our application. And again, you can dig into the app itself, and still, even though you find a Cradle file here, well, I take that back. This actually happened pretty easily this time around. In most cases, what you'll see is that Cradle doesn't build, and this file is actually just this file duplicated. Let me see if I close this down. Yeah. So this file, right? So normally what you see is this file just duplicated. So at this point, if you were to go in and choose in our project structure, choose a different compile SDK, like for 4.0, what Android Studio would do is stuff an Android node into this build Cradle script, because it hasn't completed building that just yet. So what I normally do now is to go ahead and instead of importing the ADT project as it sets when I unzip it, I'm going to go ahead and close that down and remove our reference to it. Trash this. Let me unzip it here. So what I normally do is go directly into the project properties before I even try to import the project, and delete this target line. Removing this basically gives Android Studio doesn't give it any directions on what project target it should use. So now that I've got that cleaned out, I can go ahead and open up Android Studio again, import our ADT project. We're still going to see some issues, but these are easily cleaned up now. 4.0, finish. Let Cradle build. All right, so now what we should have, likely, is a project. Of course, we're all of our EMDK objects and classes aren't coming up here because it doesn't know about the EMDK at this point in time. So now we can go directly to our project structure, and we see now that we have the app module built. We can go ahead and select the EMDK, for instance 19 here. Let Cradle complete. And there we go. We have a ADT project imported in. So now it should be able to access all the EMDK libraries. And we'll go ahead and just push this out here. Slowly but surely. And likely, advisor giving me some trouble again. All right, well, I'm just going to backtrack at this point, and again, this is an ADT project imported in, all the modifications that need to happen to make that work properly. Close this down, and one of the issues that we've seen recently over the past, say, 6 months is Android Studio has changed a lot in the way that it deals with how we select and bring the EMDK into our projects. The number one issue that we're having is that Android Studio has changed the way it deals with the compile target. So normally when you create a new project, you would, our instructions and our tutorials point you to, choose the EMDK 16 or 19 as your minimum SDK, and at one point in time, up until I believe 1.5, they chose that as the compile target as well. Somewhere after 1.5, they kind of flipped back and forth between that, whether that was the compile target or not, and now we're back to the point where it's setting it as the minimum SDK and not as the compile target. But over that period of time, people have built different versions of their application depending on their version of Android Studio. And when they try to use that version of Android or that project in a new version of Android Studio, they end up having issues with the way that it's represented in the project, or the way that it's used in the project. I'm going to go ahead and open up one of our sample applications that have already been built for Android Studio. But again, this was built quite a while back, say, probably in the 3.1 release. Likely all we've done is updated it to use the 4.1 as the target. And but even though I have 4.0 installed in here, in many cases when I try to import this project or open this project, I'm going to see some errors. So I'm going to go ahead and try to open up this project from my desktop. Our barcode sample. And of course, this is the typical gripe because it doesn't know where the SDK that was configured in that project exists, but it found a new one. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And you may also see this issue that the Gradle plugin that's used in that old project is old, and it wants to update to this latest version. So we're going to go ahead and tell it to go ahead and update. And again, we'll see the same error that even though that I have the SDK, the EMDK installed, it's griping to say that it doesn't know where to find it. So again, 19. Let's see, API 19 here. Yeah, so there's our EMDK 4.0.19. So going to the screen really solves nothing at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and backtrack out. And the best thing to do at this point is to jump into our build Gradle. And luckily we can see here that because it was an Android Studio project and it didn't go through the import process, it has gone ahead and built this app module. So we can just click on this Gradle file. And the simplest thing to do at this point is to go ahead and remove any reference to the EMDK. So what I'll do is go in and remove this and set this to, say, 19. And notice it's not in single quotes. It's just the number value here. And now it's saying that that Gradle failed to build. So we'll tell it to go ahead and try again now that we've changed our compile SDK. We also get a gripe here that it's wants to fix the Gradle wrapper and re-import the project Gradle settings. So I'm going to go ahead and let it do that. And hopefully by that point it should at least build our application. We won't have EMDK usage yet, but everything should be satisfied as far as building the app. And there it goes, it's finished now. So now what we need to do, again, we can look and see at our main activity that it'll be unhappy here. So we can again go to our project structure, choose our app module, and select the EMDK. Let it finish building here. So now we can see that in this case, because these projects were built with an older version of Android Studio, or for that matter, ADT Eclipse, it's making use of a regular activity class and older versions of themes and the like that don't require newer versions of the API. But one of the things that we've seen most recently are the fact that Android Studio now will scaffold a project that requires versions of the API that are beyond what we offer for SDK add-ons in the EMDK. So typically, I'm sure you guys have seen this same issue where you're creating a new project. And in times past, again, we've asked you to select the EMDK from this drop-down list, which, again, between different versions of Android Studio, our EMDK add-ons would show up here, and then sometimes it would, and then sometimes it will. But even the fact that it does show up now, I don't suggest that you select it because it'll cause a whole bunch of issues when it tries to scaffold the application. At this point, I just choose a high value. For instance, I've got 23 installed here, and I'm going to go ahead and let it work through the process here, create an empty activity. Let it select that. Let it finish building here. Right, well, notice that everything kind of seems happy here. We've scaffolded an application, but again, we have no references to the EMDK, so we really can't start making use of any of the libraries. So if I go to, at this point, go to project structure and change to our EMDK, 19, and select OK. Gradle's going to try to build this, but immediately we start going to see some errors here. They start complaining about different theme objects that don't exist in API 19, or at least the SDK add-on version of API 19. So, without a ton of work to go through and remove, for instance, switching to using a standard activity and changing the themes and digging through and basically gutting a lot of things out of this project, we're kind of stuck with not being able to use the EMDK as the compile target. So at this point, the best thing to do is to switch to using the EMDK as a provided library in our Gradle script. So I'm going to go ahead and get this application compiling correctly again, or building correctly again. I'm just going to choose my highest API again, selecting OK, letting Gradle build. So I no longer have any gripes here. So I'm going to go into our Gradle scripts and again choose our app module. And I'm going to add in our EMDK as a dependency. And for those of you that didn't attend a previous dev talk where I'd done some development, I'm making heavy use of live templates, which basically allows me to build chunks of code and insert them depending on the file type I'm in. So again, what I just used a keyword that I had crafted myself to insert this value in. So what we're looking at here is a provided jar file. We're telling it that we want it to look for this jar file in this at this folder path on my file system. So it should go out to my file system and find that and include it while I'm using it for development purposes. But we don't want the resulting APK to have that jar file included. So I want to go ahead and make sure that it excludes it when it tries to compile the APK. Just by simply adding this here, we're going to tell it that when we build the APK to go ahead and not include the jar because the library, the EMDK library, exists on the device already. So now we've got a project that should, after it syncs, we should be able to make use of the EMDK libraries. If I go into my main activity and, for instance, EMDK manager. Oh, yeah, so it's going to go ahead and import in. Yeah, so everything's happy. We're able to use our EMDK manager, our EMDK objects, as we would expect. And everything's happy. So I've covered a couple of different issues here, and Rob, I think I want to pause for a moment and kind of go through if there are any questions that have come up about this process, importing projects or creating new projects and getting the EMDK usable in your project.
Yeah, so again, if you have any questions, type them into the question area. I don't see anybody with a question yet, Bill. Somebody did have a hand up, and I don't see the question in. So yeah,
I may have covered it as I continued on. So.
Yeah, you might have. Yep.
Okay. All right. So that covers importing a project or creating a new project and making the EMDK usable in your project. Now I want to kind of step back, and this is something that's the topic of having the EMDK usable on a Zebra device and a non-Zebra device has come up multiple times, and we've got a few best use or best case guidelines to setting this up. But I want to walk you through that process today. I'm going to go ahead and close out this project here, and I've already scaffolded a project, and again, all I did was just chose the API version highest that I had installed on my device or on my machine at that point in time. Let's go ahead and look at a couple of things here. Our build Cradle. Yeah, so again, our compile SDK version set to 23 right now. We don't really have any references to the EMDK setup in this project. It's just basically a scaffolded app. So one of the first things that we need to do that's a little different than the way we've done in the past for all other EMDK apps that are only going to run on a Zebra device, we would typically, of course, we're still going to have to go ahead and ask for permission to use the EMDK. But something we need to do slightly different in our application node. Normally we would EMDK. Let's see. Normally we would throw in a line like this that tells Android that we want to make use of the static library or the library that's on our device. But this, if we compiled this and tried to install this on a Samsung device, for instance, the installation process would fail. So what we need to do is make use of this library in a slightly different way. And at this point, all I'm telling Android is that this library is not required. If it's there, great, I'm going to be able to use it. If not, which would be the case on a Samsung device, don't fail to install just because you can't find the EMDK library, right? So then we need to make sure that we make some changes to our Cradle project as well. And so, the process of going through and choosing this from our project structure and setting the EMDK compile target is not going to be ideal at this point because we're wanting it to build and run on a separate device, or use our Cradle build method build Gradle method to importing in, making use of the EMDK as a provided library. So again, I'm going to go here and add in our library reference, telling it where the EMDK is, and again, excluding it for the build process. And let it sync now. All right, it looks like everything is happy. So now let's go ahead and jump directly into the code, into our main activity. So again, we're using a scaffolded application that was built on 2.1.1. It's making, by default, it's making use of the app.compat activity and a bunch of libraries, which have, again, have driven us to kind of import the library in from our build Gradle. Typically, what we would do at this point with an EMDK application that was only going to run on a Zebra device is start making use of implementing our EMDK listener, implementing our on open on closed, requesting an object, an EMDK manager object. But what would happen at that point if we tried to use that, tried to load this activity on a non Zebra device? Of course, our application would almost immediately crash. We need to encapsulate every use of the EMDK into a wrapper so that depending on, we'll do some system checks to see if we are on a Zebra device, and if we are on a Zebra device, we can make use of the EMDK. Otherwise, you would be able to, add in your code at that point to use some other, for instance, barcode library. So what I'm going to do here to begin with is go ahead and declare our EMDK wrapper. And again, this is some canned code that I've already built. Let's walk through this real quick here. Luckily, I've got Android Studio to set up to automatically import, add in our import lines when I splat some code in here. So you can see that it flashed red periodically there, and then went back to the point where I could, where it's already added the imports for me. So to walk through this real quick, some things that again we would normally do in our onCreate is request our EMDK manager, and here we basically wrap that up into a single method call where we don't really have to pass any values in. Something we also do, like for instance in our own destroy, is to release all of our EMDK objects, our EMDK manager, our profile manager if we're using it. We go through and clean up all that, and again I've encapsulated all that work into a single method call. And then also our EMDK wrapper, instead of our activity implementing this, our EMDK wrapper is implementing our listener. And the required methods for the listener, again, are on open, on closed. So these satisfy the EMDK listener's needs. And so now we've got basically everything that we would normally do in a standard EMDK app running on a Zebra device in one package here. And in any work you would do, for instance, after you've got your EMDK manager object, you would normally request an instance of a barcode API or barcode manager or a profile manager. You'll want to do all that work inside our EMDK wrapper here. And so now that we've got our wrapper built, let's go ahead and create a global object, EMDK wrapper. So that it can be used elsewhere in our code or referenced elsewhere in our code. And so now we've got all the EMDK wrapper built, but we need to make sure that we don't make use of this unless we are on a Zebra device. So we're going to use the Android OS build API to look at the manufacturer string to decide whether we are on a Zebra device or not. So, okay. A bit of code here to check. So again, we're just using the Android OS build API, checking its manufacturer string and looking for Zebra technologies. Or for our legacy devices, we're looking for Motorola Solutions. And of course, if we are not a Zebra device or a Motorola Solutions device, we'd want to implement our initialization code for whatever other library we're going to use, for instance, for barcode scanning. Here I'm just going to toast up a message on Zebra. And now that we know in this if block here that we are a Zebra device, we can make use of our, start using our EMDK wrapper. So let's set our global EMDK wrapper equal to a new EMDK wrapper. And tell the EMDK wrapper to get a EMDK manager object. Let's see here. And lastly, let's go ahead and move in here and add in our onDestroy. That's not what it's do. Add in our onDestroy. Let's check to see if we'll want to clean up, again, our EMDK wrapper and any of its references in our onDestroy. But first, we're going to make sure that our wrapper, EMDK wrapper, isn't null. Not equal to null. And if it is not null, we're going to call our release, EMDK wrapper release. And again, you're going to want to make sure, this is again just a kind of a boilerplate wrapper here, and you'll want to add in, if you make use of any barcode manager objects or profile manager objects, you're going to want to go ahead and go through and add in a cleanup for those as well. Let's see, so make sure I've covered everything here. Yeah, so in our unopened here, let's go ahead and throw up a message as well that the EMDK is ready for use. Our EMDK is ready. And so now, what is it I'm happy about here? Oh, I understand why. We're referring to this as the wrapper, but what we really want is main activity. Yeah. So now we've got an application, a scaffold application, or a boilerplate application here that'll allow you to run this on a Zebra and non-Zebra device. Let's go ahead and see if I can get my devices up here visible and demonstrate it running on both. On this, in this window, I've got a TC70 running, and this I have a Samsung S4. So I'm going to go ahead and debug to my Zebra device to start with. And if we're lucky, still compiling there. It should build our app, our APK, and push it out to the TC70. While that's building, Rob, have there been any questions come in?
As a matter of fact, there has been, Bill. 2 questions. So the first one was about your live templates.
Okay.
If we can make those available, because they seem pretty useful.
Yeah.
So we talked about.
I'll work through that in just a moment. Sorry, actually, it just it fired up and went away real quickly there. Hold on just a moment.
Okay.
Kick it off again because it shouldn't have to build it again. But if anybody noticed here, you'll see that this says the MDK is ready here, our toast message. So again, we've built and ran this application on a Zebra device, and now I want to go through and build and push it to our Samsung device, and we should see it throw the toast message that it's a non-Zebra device, if we're lucky here. Yeah, as far as live templates go, actually, I'll kind of show the process here real quick of how to add one in, and then I'll show how to actually get that as basically an XML file that you can drop into yours and make use of it. So,
Yeah, I think the question was more about can we share the ones that we've already put together?
I think so. I may go ahead and just put together a blog post about live templates and attach that as a file.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Um, as of now, I mean, I'll have to go through and kind of clean up. I have a other live templates in there as well, not just the MDK. So anyway, you'll see here that we ran on our S4, and we popped up that it was a non-Zebra device. So that, in a nutshell, is basically the kind of the boilerplate code you need to scaffold out your application to run on both Android and Zebra and non-Zebra. You said there was a second question, Rob?
Yeah, the second question was more about detecting. I think you showed detecting the manufacturer by string. Yeah, it contains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it contains Zebra. So this person said what he did was check for no class def found exception while getting the EMDK manager instance.
Gotcha.
Is this good enough? This is what he does when he runs. Especially helpful when he's running this on an emulator, so he doesn't have to do anything special.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've not used that method, so I'd like to see it for sure. I mean, if there's a better method or cleaner method than this, I'd definitely like to see that. May reach out to that person afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, but at this point, this seemed to kind of be the cleanest method to test to see whether I was on a Zebra device or not. These strings will always be here if we're on a Zebra device. And again, the Motorola solutions would be there, of course, if it was a legacy or an older operating system BSP for your device. So yeah, the as far as I think that we can easily hand out. I'll clean up my live templates and maybe attach that again as one of the items to our announcement for this blog finishing, or I'm sorry, for this DevTalk finishing.
Okay.
Lastly, I would like to, if there's no other questions, I'd like to go ahead and jump back over to our presentation real quick and talk about some concurrency guidelines for the MDK. I spoke about this briefly that when using the different EMDK APIs, they make use of some of the same hardware. If you're using the barcode manager, for instance, that same scanner hardware is used in the SimulScan or the scan and pair manager. And so if you've got, for instance, this first bullet point here is making sure, of course, that if you only have a single instance of the EMDK manager in your application at a time. If you create an instance and you're done with it, go ahead and destroy that or release that instance to create another one if you wish for any reason. Another thing to point out is that if, for instance, you have an EMDK manager object and further down in your code you request a profile manager object, the EMDK manager object is always going to give you a singleton object. It's going to create that object once and continue to give you that profile manager instance, for instance, over and over again. So no matter how many times you request it, you're always going to get that same profile manager object back from that EMDK manager object. That would be the same for profile manager, barcode manager, scan and pair, all of them. Lastly, again, I talked about that, but the profile, barcode manager, scan and pair manager, profile manager, they can all be created. You can have all these objects brought to life, instances ready to use, but they can't be used at the same time. so that the barcode manager, if it was in use, you had some scanner objects, you'll need to make sure release and get rid of that before you try to make use of the barcode manager and any of the others. Now, I think that at this point the profile manager may be the exception to the rule if you're not using the data capture APIs and you're just setting the clock or building a Wi-Fi profile. I believe that you can use these in conjunction with each other, but again, just as a general rule, not using the objects at the same time. Kind of some examples of why these are necessary. These guidelines are necessary. For instance, if you've got the barcode manager enabled and it's got a scanner device, you can't create any other scanner devices. You can't make use of any other. It's one scanner at a time. And to drive that point home, even if you were using the camera, for instance, even if it's not particularly a barcode scanner hardware on the device, even if you're using the camera as a scanner, even the Android camera APIs are locked out. You can't use them as well. I've not tried this myself, to be honest with you, but if I was, from what I understand, if you try to use the camera APIs while you're using a camera, while the scanner camera is set up, those will not function either. Let's see. Yeah. So again, if you've got a barcode scanner object set up and in use, SimulScan and Scan and Pair Manager objects also won't be able to instantiate and make use of those APIs when that barcode device is in use. So you'd have to clean these up before either one of these APIs could make use of it. Once the barcode manager is disabled, released, they can both make use of those APIs. And lastly, there's a lot of I don't know if it's confusion, but there are points in times where I've seen folks use the barcode APIs and the data capture APIs from Profile Manager in the same application, and we don't suggest you do that. You need to kind of choose one or the other. If you're going to use the barcode APIs for its flexibility and closer control over the scanner, and that's what you need in your application, then you would definitely go that way. But if you want a graphic user interface to kind of build your scanning profiles out, of course that's the way to go. But never use them in the same application. And to that is about it, Rob, that I've got to cover today. If there are any questions.
Alrighty. So again, yeah, this will be available on developer.zebra.com, also known as Launchpad, and the recording will be posted there. Let me just check to see, because there was a couple of questions that came in through chat and the question area. Yeah, so I don't see any other questions coming in, Bill.
Okay. All right.
Just give it another second, as somebody might be typing madly at the last minute. There was a question before about the emulator, it was actually EMDK for Xamarin and using it on an emulator. So I don't think that's possible, right?
No, you have the same limitations that you would with the EMDK for Android. It's even with the EMDK for Android, you're still making use at a lower level of that library that's installed on our Zebra device and only available on our Zebra device.
Okay, so
it's not really packaged. Go ahead.
Sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it's not packaged in any way that we could install that on someone else's devices. It's heavily reliant upon the hardware and the value adds that we add to our devices.
Okay.
So yeah, that it won't work in an emulator.
Okay, so this other question was more about multiple instances or multiple applications running at the same time. So if you wanted to access Profile Manager, let's say, from multiple APKs, what's the best way of going about doing it? I found that you have to release the EMDK Manager instance after use in order to allow other APKs to work. So maybe you want to spend a few minutes on that.
Yeah, I mean that's and it really kind of goes back to these same guidelines. Is that even though and it would be the same if you had the same application with multiple threads running, trying to make use of the profile manager. The you shouldn't use, and it depends on the things that you're trying to process at that point in time. If you've got profile manager open in one application and it's sending profiles to be processed and sent off to the CSPs that are on the device, I think that it will sequentially process those profiles that you have sent. But again, guidelines are that you shouldn't have multiple APKs or multiple threads trying to make use of those profile EMDK objects at the same time.
Okay, yeah, and I think you covered it. I think the question was more about, hey, is this going to change this behavior in terms of, when will we allow this to happen? And I don't know if it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I do think so. As far as even as far as having not having more than one EMDK manager object, I think that there are some issues in architecture that don't allow that to happen at this point in time, or it causes some issues. I know that they're working towards resolving that, but I don't have a timeline on it or anything else. There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up, Rob, and I was hoping we could announce 4.2 being available, EMDK and for Android 4.2 being available at this point in time, but it's not ready for download just yet. We've released the documentation, but again, we're waiting on that. But one of the things that I had pointed out while we were building and importing projects earlier is being able to select EMDK API 16 or 19 from the drop-down list in our project structure. In 4.2, we're also releasing a SDK add-on for API 2.2. So that will alleviate some of the issues with projects being scaffolded and making use of things that rely on, for instance, something at 2. Or 21, API 21. We'll be able to select 22 and everything build without you having to add that to your build Cradle. But anyway, that's one of the features of 4.2 that'll soon be available for download.
Okay. Jock says great presentation and presenter. Thank you, Jock, for the positive comments. Thank you very much. And next question from Roy: where can I find the trigger for the Cradle utility MC18 Android Kitkat?
Trigger.
Cradle utility. Not sure if I follow that question. Yeah. I think he's talking about API wise. I don't know if you want to bring up the tech docs for the MC18 specific. Yeah. Maybe just kind of navigate that.
And again, if everybody's not familiar with tech docs here, of course we link to from Launchpad. But we've added quite a few things to tech docs here. Our printer APIs and MX references, and of course references for Stage now. But so let's go to the APIs for EMDK for Android.
And just by the way, when you're on this site, you'll see that we added this version drop down now. So you can select the specific version of EMDK that you're looking for. So we have up to the previous version, and continuing going forward, we'll show the latest version by default. So yeah. And Roy, if you want to chime in, if you're still on with any further clarifying comments. So there's the personal shopper APIs as the complete package that contains all of the APIs for the MC18.
And so this is actually going to tell the Cradle to unlock itself.
Right.
And so again, you have programmatic control over that, but I'm not clear without a little more explanation. I'm not sure what he meant by trigger.
Well, yeah, I don't know either. So the MC18, what can you do from an API point of view? I mean, as far as the Cradle goes, you can unlock it, enable, disable communication. There's really not much you can do here besides that. So, yeah.
Yeah. There are there's a little confusion. I think that maybe we'll do a deep dive on these in one of our dev talks as well. Is that there's quite a few things that we expose in this Cradle API, but there seem to be some missing holes when it comes to, like, for instance, knowing that your device has actually been seated in the Cradle or not. And it was the MDK engineers tried hard not to duplicate anything that was already available in the standard Android APIs, for instance. And the battery intent APIs that are provided by the standard Android APIs give you the knowledge that you need to know in your code to programmatically know whether your device is charging or not, for instance. And you would use that to trigger back and forth whether you knew that the device had been pulled out or seated back in. So anyway, yeah, maybe we'll do a deep dive on the Cradle APIs and stuff in a future dev talk.
Yeah, somebody else chimed in. Jock was saying, I believe he wants to know when the unit is slipped into the cradle. Basically, what you were talking about. He says he uses the power notification and then tries to receive the.
I'm sorry.
He says he uses the power notification. The power notification.
Yeah. So there. Okay. There's. I may be thinking about a different one, but what we've used in the past, unfortunately, I don't have a sample of it here easily available. But depending on, of course, you set up your broadcast receiver to receive the battery intents, and there's a particular battery intent. One of them will tell you that your device is charging. But there's another one that I think that the one he's talking about, which is basically tells you that you're on AC power, and that one is the one to know for sure that your device is charging and it's in the cradle. And when you lose that, you know that your device has been pulled out of the cradle.
Right. Okay. Another comment. This came from Brock, having to do with the instance question before. He said, I would suggest releasing EMDK Manager prior to on destroy. On resume, you should create the instance. On pause, you should destroy. Otherwise, you'll have issues with other applications using the EMDK Manager. So any comments?
Right. And that is a great, yeah, that is a great method to use. And you'll see that in for instance, I believe the barcode manager samples. The other samples don't necessarily scaffold that out so that it cleans that up and you're on pause and on resume. The only downfall to that is the overhead it takes to construct those objects each time you come in and out of the application. So in some cases, barcode scanning, for instance, you're going to see a little bit of delay, and that overhead, if it's acceptable, great. If not, then you have to kind of restrict the application itself and how it's being used. And if you don't, destroy those objects on pause, on resume, then you'll need to make sure that you don't use, none of your other applications use that barcode manager object.
All right. I don't see any other questions, Bill. So I think we're basically done. Just as a friendly reminder. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, there was another question. Right. He is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He was just talking about the APIs. So just as a friendly reminder, when you leave the webinar, just there's a really quick survey. It'll only take you 10 seconds to do. Just let us know how we're doing. But more importantly, let us know what you want to hear from us. Okay. We're just trying to pick from the comments we see and the things we think are important. But obviously, we would rather hear directly from you on the topics you want to hear. So this way we cover the topics that are important. So just want to thank Bill for doing the presentation, and thanks everybody for attending today and taking your time out of your day. We look forward to seeing you in the next Dev Talk, which will be coming up in July. So anyway, thanks again, Bill. Any last comments?
Nope, that's it. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.